Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Snap Tactics with GunnyT. I'm so excited to bring you this information. This all started with a Facebook post I had seen where someone was saying that they were having trouble with climbing because they thought they were poor at snapping. Well, I thought about it for a while, and I came up with a long list of tips that I thought really helped me climb early on, and I shared them. From there, I took it out on a Discord, and some of the members in my Discord said that it helped them reach infinite, even high numbers of infinite, 1,500, helped me get to the top 500. So through this series, my goal is to give this information to you. What we're going to do is I'm going to record gameplay that I've done, and we're going to review it. We're going to pause when we need to. I'm going to talk tactically through some of the decisions that I'm making, utilizing these rules and tips. That way, that at the end of the day, hopefully you can take those into your own games and get a little bit better yourself. Whatever your goals are. Is your goal to make infinite? Go for it. You want to make top 10,000? You want to make top 1,000? Whatever it is, these tips right here that we're going to go through are the way to do it. All right, before we dig into this first video, I want to break down the snap tips that I actually came up with. I'm not going to break these down in each video. It'll be kind of long and drawn out, but I do want to break them down in this first one so we can reference it in the future. I will also have a full breakdown that I've given to folks in the past at the very end of the video. That way you can screenshot it for future study if you want, and it's also going to be in the description of this video. So the first one here is to know your big plays. A great example of this is early on if you're playing an ongoing deck, and you draw a spectrum or have a spectrum early. If you have a good curve and that spectrum is your big play. You can count on slamming that thing down on turn 6, getting a whole bunch of stats, and hopefully taking home victory on that. So make sure you play your deck enough to know what cards you're looking for and what your big plays are. Tip 2 is snap on turns 2, 3, and 4. Those are the important tips, those are the important turns to snap on, because it doesn't give too much information away from your opponent. Now, this is meaning that you have drawn into some of the cards that you know you need. Say, for instance, there's a great Black Knight deck going around, and Zabu is very important to that deck. It helps you with your curve so much. So if I have a turn 2 Zabu, well, maybe that is one of my snap conditions to do on turn 2 before I reveal it. And then towards the end here on turn 4, if you have enough of your combo pieces and you're seeing it all coming together, make sure you're snapping by that point. Don't bet on drawing into a better hand. So if your opponent does do that snap correctly on turns 2, 3, and 4, if your hand isn't there and you don't see a good curve, you don't have any of your big plays, don't bet on drawing into a better one. There is obviously a chance that you can draw into it, but your opponent most likely already has the cards that they need to win. So don't bet that you are going to draw the cards to outclass them when they already have them in hand. Retreat when your opponent snaps on turn 5. This is really important because that you've already given away all the information about your deck. To this point, other than one more play that you have at the very end of the game, your opponent has seen what you're doing and they're betting that they can do it better than you. Most likely, if at that point, unless you have some kind of crazy counterplay, just walk away. Take your loss. It's fine. You'll make up for the next one. And on the flip side of that, don't snap on turn 5. You may hear from time to time that's called boomer snapping. Really what it comes down to is if you snap on turn 5, most likely your opponent should correctly retreat. So at that point, you've lost a cube. I would rather take a 2-cube victory than a 1-cube retreat from my opponent. I know it's a guaranteed 1 cube at that point, but I don't want that guaranteed cube. I've already got a strong play in hand. If I'm thinking about snapping, then I really have a good idea that I'm going to win. Take your 2-cube victory, move on to your next game. Next tip here is don't stick around just because you have snapped. So if you snap early and are at 4 cubes or 2 cubes or whatever, and it gets to the end of the game and you haven't drawn your last combo piece, there's nothing saying that you have to stick around. Take that retreat. It happens. You can take a retreat here. It's better to lose your 4 cubes than it is to lose your 8 cubes. You'll make up for it in the future. Retreat if your opponent has the one card that beats you. A good example I like to give here is Alioth. So if your opponent has priority in 2 different lanes and you have a big card that you can flip a lane for here and take home victory, but they have a deck that may play Alioth, well, it's a good idea to retreat that game. There's a 70% chance in every game that you see any given card in your deck. So that's a 70% chance that your opponent has that one card that beats you. Don't bet on a losing case there, right? 70% chance. Be patient and click retreat later. I'll use the Alioth example again. So there's a chance that they don't have that Alioth. So they may know that you have big cards like Devil Dinosaur or something in your deck. If they think that you do and they don't have the answer for it, they may click retreat later too. So just hang out, click retreat later, spend a few more seconds waiting on your opponent, because you may save yourself one or more cubes just by hanging out and not going on to your next game. All right, retreat often and revel in your 4 and 8 cube victories. This is so important. You want to bet on the hands that you know are going your way. Sometimes you'll stick around for a 2 cube game because both players are really not doing anything. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're not doing anything, your opponent is popping off. Don't just stick around through a game. Retreat if you need to. What you want to do is you want to force your opponent to see your best hands. Snap into those hands. Take those 4 cubes from them. Take those 8 cubes from them. Because those will make up for, time and time again, all of those 1 and 2 cube retreats. Next one here is players do not bluff on Marvel Snap. All right, obviously that's not true. Players bluff. Lambie just bluffed me today, and I was told afterwards from somebody watching his stream that he didn't have the answer card that he bluffed. But for the most part, it is, in my experience, true that players don't bluff in Marvel Snap. If they snap you, it's normally for a reason. They have the card that beats you. They have an answer to what you're doing. They have a bigger play than what you're going to do. So unless you have a good answer, just respect the snap and take the retreat. Snap before you play your tech pieces. This is really important. So in my experience playing against Destroy, a lot of times they're really greedy. So they'll play something like a Forge into a Deadpool on the same lane. It's a very common play because they want to eat more of those cards together to pump up their nulls and stuff later. So if my opponent plays maybe an X23 out on a lane and I have an armor in hand, I want to make sure I'm snapping before I play that armor. I don't want to give away that information and tell my opponents that I've got an answer to what you're doing. I want to make them pay to see that answer, and hopefully they'll stick around a little bit later, see that Cosmo coming out of my deck and shutting down 2 of their lanes, and I'll even take more cubes away from them. All right, and last tip here is to play Conquest to test a deck. It can be really costly to test out a deck on ladder. I do this all the time. Even before I get into a ladder run, I'll take a deck onto Conquest, even the deck that I know really well, just to get myself warmed up, make sure I know the ins and outs of my deck. And if I'm ever testing a deck for the first time, I'm always playing it on Conquest. Next, we're going to move on to the deck that I'm using today. I think it's important that I show you the deck. That way you can understand what kind of play pattern I'm looking for and what kind of finishers. That way when I'm making snap decisions, that makes more sense to you. So going on the deck, I've got my Big Dumb Idiots deck here. What it's looking to do is play early setup pieces such as Armor and Cosmo to help secure lanes for my Big Dumb Idiots. The Warpath and the Atuma here in the mid game, finishing it out with a Blob, Scar, or Destroyer, something like that. The entire goal is I want to take 2 lanes from my opponent and just put so much stats there that they won't be able to recover from it. Sometimes I Hayaka on turn 6, throwing a bunch of stats into a different lane if I have like a really reduced cost Scar or something. But that's what I'm trying to do, is just overwhelm my opponent. My early snap conditions would be something like an Armor into a Gladiator in a different lane, with an Atuma that's being protected by my armor into a Ronin, and then finishing it off with a Scar and a Maximus and a Quake or something like that. Those are the ideal kind of hands I'm looking for with this deck. The first game I have lined up for us here is a really exciting one. I think that there's solid fundamentals not only on my behalf, but I think my opponent did a fantastic job with this game. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off so we can talk about the entire game and my thought process throughout. So drawing into my opening hand, I already see that I have a good playline. I have Warpath on turn 4 into Ronin on turn 5 into a reduced cost Scar on turn 6. Really the only thing I could be asking for a little bit better here would be some kind of setup piece such as a Cosmo or an Armor. On turn 2, I do end up actually drawing my Armor. So at this point, if I wanted to, I could snap. Now you can see up top that this is the second round of a conquest match, and I've only actually seen 4 cards from my opponent. So I don't exactly know what it is that they're trying to accomplish with their deck. So I'm going to hold off on this snap just to find out a little bit more information. This could be really useful on the ladder because who knows, maybe they're going to do some kind of plays that completely null and void what you're trying to do here. Maybe they lock out a location on us and have some kind of lockout deck. I'm not sure. So I'm not going to snap into it yet. I still have 2 more turns. I can snap on turn 2 or turn 3, but we're going to move into our 3rd turn here. So on turn 3, we end up revealing the Fisk Tower. And I want to talk about this for a second. So my opponent immediately snaps on the Fisk Tower. That's pretty telling to me. That to me speaks that they have some way to move my cards into that location. As a rule, remember we talked about players don't bluff. So I think at this point, they believe they are going to make a strong play either into that location or they just have a really strong presence in their hand. Maybe they were waiting to see what it is that I was doing. I'm not exactly certain, but I still have a very good game plan. So I'm going to stick it out a little bit. My opponent ends up playing a wave here, which is pretty good for me. Now I can start dropping some of those bigger threats like Ronin out or the Blob, which I just drew. I do apologize. This is pre-nerf Blob, so it's going to get absolutely ginormous, but still the fundamentals apply. It's one of my big plays. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and snap back. I'm going to make my opponent pay to see my big play, which is the Blob. I have massive amount of points in my hand. I do not think that my opponent can overcome what it is that I've got going on. It's also turn 4. If this was turn 5, they may run away, and I would rather take their 4 cubes than 8. But at this point, I think that what I'm going to do is going to outclass my opponent. So they end up playing Magneto here, which I had spoke about before. I told you that they had some kind of way to move my cards into that location. Unfortunately for them, they didn't have anything to move. So now they've been outclassed. They're already in for 4 points, so there's no reason not to take it into the 5th turn of the game. But whenever I play this Ronin out, now I've locked down this situation. I have a reduced cost Scar. I can now play this into the big house because it's so cheap. So I know I'm going to win these 8 cubes. The writing's on the wall, and then this game is over. This is where I think my opponent did a fantastic job here. They retreated on a 4 cube loss. They didn't try to stick it out and see if they could come up with some kind of game plan. They ended up retreating. Take that 4 cube loss. It is so much better than losing 8, especially on the ladder. Conquest is one thing, we're playing for silver, gold, infinity tickets, but on the ladder, it is so important to just take your losses whenever you can and do not just try to stick around because you snapped previously. The next game I have lined up for us here I think is a really exciting one, again with some good tactical thoughts, good game plan, and a good flow to it. I paused it here for a second because I just wanted to point out that this was my first push up to top 500, where big gains and losses can mean that I'm either going to make it or I'm not going to make it. I don't remember exactly where, but I remember Lambie talking about being a robot and playing the same way all the time. Eventually, if you have good habits, whenever you play the same way all the time, no matter how close it is to your goal, if you're trying to make it to infinite or if you're trying to make it to top, 10,000, 1,000, 500 like myself, if you play properly, eventually you will make it there. So this game was kind of important to me. I really, really wanted to win it. I had never made it up this high before, and I'm making my push. So we reveal our first location here, which ends up being Gamma Lab. Gamma Lab is pretty good, especially with a Quake in my hand. So I am already thinking about, if I get the wheels turning, about taking that location that I think my opponent probably play into and flipping it into my favor. So my opponent ends up playing an X-23. And an X-23 to me means a lot because Destroy typically plays a bunch of cards into one location. So I'm already expecting to see something like a Forge or just multiple cards going into that one location. That way they could take advantage of that spot. So I've already got the idea in my head that I'm going to play out this Maximus. Maximus isn't normally a good play. In this deck, you can play it early if you need to fight for a location, which I'm using it for right now because I want to get that Hulk. Especially after drawing this Scar, it's going to reduce the cost of my Scar by that much more. And exactly what I had said, my opponent ends up playing a Forge onto that location. So at this point, I've got a good game plan. I already know I'm going to flip it away from there. I'm going to take those hulks away from them, and I'm going to end up having 2 hulks myself from playing the 0 there as well. This is going to be huge for me. But at the same time, my opponent just snapped me back. I think that they're snapping me back because they're going to end up playing maybe a Carnage on top of this location, following it up with another card, or I really don't think they would end up playing 4 Hulks onto the same location, but they're gambling that they are going to be able to maximize this Gamma Lab better than I am. But I think, again, I'm sticking around because I've already got a solid game plan. Unfortunately for me, this is where things start to go bad. We're already at 4 cubes, and my opponent has just played 2 cards on top of the new Gamma Lab location, which is kind of awful because that was something that I was counting on. Not only that, but because of the Wakandan embassy that popped up, they've now played a Deadpool that they've destroyed, which just got massive. It just went up 10 points of power. But now they're getting a Hulk on top of that. It's not all bad for me yet, though. So at this point, they do have that Deadpool in hand. They've already used their Carnage. So I don't really have to worry about that. So we're going to stick it out. I'm already invested for 4 cubes, so there's no reason to not ride this out for me. I do have some solid plays here. Unfortunately, my turn 4 goes into just a dead Warpath because I've already used my 0 here, but my Scar is already pretty reduced cost, and I have a Ronin to back it up. So I'm still feeling pretty confident at this point. So my opponent ends up playing over into the White Hot Room, where now they've filled it up, and they've got that max amount of energy, and things are really, really looking poor for me. Unless my opponent goofs this up really hard, there is no way I can win this game. Again, I'm already in for 4 cubes. There's no reason to run away at this point. If I wanted to, I absolutely could have. But let's just see what they do, and see if I can end up pulling out victory. Remember, if I win these 4 cubes right now, I'm going to that top 500, which is what my entire goal of this evening that I was playing was. So on this next turn, my opponent drops 3 cards into the middle location. It ends up being a huge Deadpool, a Death, and a Venom. They have a massive Venom in their hand. They have a 40-point Deadpool, and then who knows what else going on there. Unfortunately for me, looking at the cards in my hand, and really in this deck in particular, like, there is no way for me to win at this point. Had I drawn maybe an Armor or a Cosmo earlier, this could have been a winnable game for me. But this is a situation where I'm not going to be able to pull it off. I do say, always push that retreat later button. But at this point, like, there's absolutely no way that my opponent doesn't win this game. No matter where they stick their Deadpool at, this game is over. So I went ahead and clicked retreat now. But I think my opponent did a fantastic job playing into their outs and really just kind of maximizing on this game. And I take my 4 cube loss. That's better than an 8 cube loss. We had already spoken about this before, about what my opponent just did, where they took that 4 cube loss instead of an 8 cube loss. And again, if I'm pushing for top 500, there is no way I'm going to make it there by gambling on silly things like trying to flip one of these locations. It's just not going to work in my favor. So I think this game in particular really kind of pushed out that fact that you need to make sure you're retreating whenever you need to. Don't bet on trying to win a game just because you're so close to victory that you can taste it. This last game isn't something that we're going to talk about. I just wanted to showcase it. I told you I was making my push to top 500. I have never made it that high before. 2 months ago, my goal was to make it a top 10,000. I did it. Last month, my goal was to make it a top 1K. I did it. This month, my goal was to make it a top 500. I don't know what we'll do from here. I don't know if I have the time that I can invest into making it a top 100, but the sky's the limit. I utilize the tips that I'm sharing with you in order to make it this high. I know you too can do whatever it is that you want. You can just focus on 1 or 2 of these tips at a time in order to get better. Maybe it's knowing your snap conditions and your big plays and then snapping early. Maybe it's retreating better, or knowing what your opponent's snaps mean as far as like retreating on turn 5 whenever they snap into you. Whatever it is, just focus on those, and eventually you will get better and you will climb. Many people have told me that my tips have in fact helped them do that. Thank you for making it this far into the video. I really enjoyed bringing you this information, and I can't wait to make more of these. My goal is to release one every week or two, just depending on my time and my schedule that I have. I'm an active duty military member, so I don't always have time to do this kind of content, but I will make more, and we will grow as a community. Our job here is just to get better and get better together. Whenever I create this kind of content, it jogs my brain. It also helps me get better. So together we're going to grow. After the end here, I'm going to have a full screen image of my tips as well as their description, so you can take a screenshot of it either on your mobile device or on your computer, and that way you can kind of read them at your own pace. They'll also be located in the description to this video. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this, and then throw some stuff down in the comments if there's things that you would like me to maybe improve on or expound upon. And you can also find me floating around different Discords. I'm on the Lambie Discord, I'm on the KM Discord, I'm on the Marvel Snap Zone Discord. So reach out to me on there, and I'll have a link to what my Discord name is as well, so you can ask me. I have helped several people on Discord already, just with personal chats, and they've all told me that my tips have helped them get better. I want to help you get better as well, and this is how we're going to do it. Until next time, GunnyT out.